I guess what I'll try to do is situate the work I did on this book, Blues Legacies and Black Feminism, within a context of women's history, within a context of trying to uncover women's history from marginalized communities, from hidden sources. Because as we think about our relationship to history and as we continually construct our history, there are certain aspects of that history that are never supposed to be discovered, that are supposed to remain hidden. When we talk about the contributions that poor women, poor Black women made, we're not supposed to acknowledge them as having been agents of history.
If this society of yours is a great society, God knows I would hate to live in a bad one.
Hey Jude, don't be afraid. Take your country, you make it better. Remember, you let her in your heart, baby. You can start to make it better.
I think that the human race does command its own destiny, and that destiny can eventually embrace the stars.
Which side are you on? Which side are you on?
I don't know how dangerous it is today, but I do know that more and more of us are glad for the opportunity to stand up and be counted. We as actors and actresses should take part in the most important drama that this country has seen. And again, the name of the drama is freedom.
I feel that it is an incredible time to be living. There is something going on in the ether.
Sometimes I feel like a motherless child. You may run on for a long time, run on for a long time. You may run on now for a long time, but let me tell you, God Almighty's gonna cut you down. Go tell that long-tongued liar. Go tell that midnight rider. Tell the gambling rambler, backbiter. Tell them God Almighty's gonna cut them down.
Like most of our songs, and it comes from Poundland in the Eastern Cape, where my father came from. In the olden days, the young Xhosa maidens often sang this song in praise of the young Xhosa braves as they would get ready to go out into battle. In other words, it's a song of encouragement. We call it Cholingo.
The pool players, 7 at the Golden Shovel. We real cool, we left school, we learn light, we strike straight, we sing sin, we then gin, we jazz June, we die soon.
It's a modern world. It's a modern world. A modern world. Oh, it's a modern world. Did you look at the sun? can't see through the maze. Take a look at the sun. Too many things covering the rays. A mighty world. Sun's warming a mighty world.
Good afternoon, everyone. Umateo Tlasakamati to the creators of the Four Directions and all the elements. My name is Pescat Akat, and that is a name I received in ceremony. And I'm very grateful to be asked to do the land acknowledgement for this very powerful gathering here today. When we engage in, when we host, when we listen, when we witness land acknowledgements, it's really important to keep in mind that we're not simply just acknowledging who the original peoples were, but we're really trying to empower all of those who hear the words to look into their lands of where they're residing and learn more about the people who are the original stewards of where they are. So although today I'm going to be acknowledging the original stewards of where I happen to be, you all are in so many different places, and I really want to encourage and empower all of you to go online and look and see that those people are not only traditional cultural people from the past, they are traditional cultural people living in the now, in the modern, and have many wonderful things going on within their own tribal nations and affinities. So today, again, I want to thank everyone who's invited me, and also thank my Native sisters who have given me permission to do this. I want to thank the Tataviam tribe, their tribal president and tribal vice president, for continuing to do good work here in the Northeast San Fernando Valley, which is their tribal home, which extends even further up, but most of you maybe not know where that is. They have done a wonderful work in being stewards, past, present, and are continuing to lay the seeds so that work can go on into the future. So thank you, everybody. Happy International Women's Day, and I wish you all an absolutely fabulous gathering today. Ometeo Tlasakamati.
Welcome and happy International Women's Day. My name is Nancy Berlin. I live in Los Angeles, California, and I'm one of the quad chairs of the California Poor People's Campaign, as well as a member of Global Women's Strike, one of the partner groups for the National Poor People's Campaign. I'm also part of the Alexandria House community, a shelter and neighborhood center for women and children.
And I'm Trini Rodriguez. I'm also very happy to be here. I grew up in working class Pacoima, and I live in the Northeast San Fernando Valley of Los Angeles, where I'm also part PPC. And I'm also the coordinating committee, San Fernando Valley of Los Angeles, where I'm also part of PPC. And I'm also the coordinating committee, San Fernando Valley of Los Angeles, where I'm also part of community and PPC, all its forms. And I'm also the coordinating committee, San Fernando Valley of Los Angeles, where I'm also part of community.
International Women's Day began with Teresa Serber Malkiel, a Russian-born Jewish woman who is a mother and a labor organizer. She lived in New York City and proposed the first National Women's Day in 1909. Later, countries around the world adopted March 8th as International Women's Day. For 20 years, Global Women's Strike had been holding International Women's Day events in Los Angeles, where I'm from. And we marched, we rallied, we sang, and we danced in the streets to show our power and solidarity with women at home and around the world. Our last one was in March 2020, just before the beginning of the pandemic shutdown. So this year, we proposed to the California Poor People's Campaign that we do the event together and have it as an online event so more people could join. And that led to inviting national PPC partners and women's organizations to join in as well. We're so excited to be here with all of you today.
Yes, this year's theme is End Women's Poverty, Invest in Caring, Not Killing. Women and children make up 70% of poor people in the US, and women's unpaid caregiving work alone contributes 1.5 trillion to the US economy. Today, we'll lift up the struggles, strength, contributions, and commitment of women to an abundant economy, thriving communities, and bold movements for systemic change. We'll hear the words, ideas, dreams, and music of powerful women. And we also want you to tell us who you are. So please share your name and where you're from in the chat. We hope you'll be energized by today's program. We are the answer to our ancestors' prayers and sacrifices. We are not alone. We won't be silent anymore.
Well, thank you, Trini, and thank you, Nancy Berlin. This is Margaret Prescott. I'm on the coordinating committee of the California Poor People's Campaign. I'm also with Women of Color in the Global Women's Strike. Happy International Day, everyone. Then, and welcome Congresswoman Gwen Moore, because it is my honor to wish Congresswoman Gwen Moore a happy International Women's Day, as well as to introduce her. Congresswoman Moore represents Wisconsin's 4th congressional district. She knows what living in poverty is like. She knows what being separated from her children are like. And she is a champion in Congress on the many challenges facing women, starting with those of us who are impoverished. She stands up for us all in the House Ways and Means Committee and is active on several congressional caucuses. She grew up one of 8 children, and Congresswoman Gwen Moore never forgets the community she comes from. Congresswoman Moore, thank you for joining us, and we welcome you.
No, thank you so much. I was so terrified that your introduction was going to end and I wouldn't have been able to figure out how to turn the video and audio on. So happy to be here. Happy International Women's Day. I got my purple and my green on to celebrate purple for royalty and how women lead in everything, and green, how we create and prosper and grow. Of course, I belong to a body, the United States Congress, where there is no equity between men and women in terms of our service, and there never will be, because our Constitution, unlike constitutions that are newer around the world, don't prescribe that we have equality. And you know, this is a job where you know, women find themselves as is usual, really struggling between their family obligations and really providing service, so that it is really a privilege to be one of the women. With my family is growing up a little bit, but they've allowed me to come and stand in the gap. And you know, as we celebrate International Women's Day, we look at the plight of women all over the world. And we feel some solidarity with those women who are trying to make sure that they're not killed or jailed for choosing to wear or not wear headscarves. But in so many ways, that is so similar to our own efforts here in the United States, just to be able to have control of our own personal bodies, to be able to determine when and when we should not become parents, or if we should become parents. Honest to God, at age 71, I never thought I'd be relitigating and fighting this same fight over and over again. Having just come out the pandemic, we are reminded, of course, that we don't make as much money as men, that our opportunities to make those dollars are just not there. And, you know, try as we may, the kind of work that women do, there's comparable worth, and all the work that we do is always kind of devalued in a way that we don't really make the kinds of money that we deserve. I think of people who are nursing home assistants, for example, that keep our parents and our loved ones alive. They're often on the front line. I mean, there's not a doctor standing at a nursing home. There may be one person who's an RN on the floor, and the rest of them are women primarily who are there. They're the person that's noticing whether or not your blood pressure is dropping precipitously, or they're the people there that are preventing you from having a fall. And yet, these are the lowest paid workers. These are people often who are working without health insurance and stability in their own lives. This is one of the reasons why I have leaned into, and my stewardship on the Ways and Means Committee, in improving the earned income tax credit. Because I think one of the chief beneficiaries of an earned income tax credit done right will be women in the workforce, women who are doing healthcare, and women who are doing caretaking of loved ones that may not necessarily be in nursing homes, but they're taking care of them. They're cutting their careers in half to take care of parents and in-laws and loved ones, spouses in their homes, and they are providing uncompensated care. It's shocking but true that somewhere between $500 million and $1 trillion a year, women primarily are providing uncompensated care. And I wanted to look at the earned income tax credit and to be able to look at that as a vehicle to compensate women who have been forced to cut hours or to completely cut their careers out to take care of other people that are within their homes. And so I have the support of Chairman Neal, who's now the ranking member of the Ways and Means Committee, to continue to explore this. Again, a lot of what I value comes out of my own lived experience. Really want to improve the WIC program so that it's accessible to a lot more women. And, part of my experience with the WIC program is it doesn't just need to be milk. A lot of people don't even drink cow milk. We need to expand the program to make sure that it has more nourishing fruits and vegetables, and that the hours are accessible for women to be able to get to the sites and to get the support on a regular basis, because so many women don't use it because the WIC offices are only open during times of the day that women are either in school or working. We need to change the formulary for WIC.
All righty. Well, once we are waiting for Congresswoman Moore to come back on, what I'd like to do is to just share with you some of the background of International Women's Day. A lot of people don't know that the earliest version was a National Women's Day that was organized by the Socialist Party of America in New York City, and that was February 28th, 1909. Okay. And then women gained suffrage, of course, in Russia in 1917. The February Revolution began by 1911, and that was March 19th. And notice all the different dates, okay? It wasn't until later that it was settled that International Women's Day was March 8th. But the first International Women's Day was marked by over 1 million people in Austria, in Denmark, in Germany, in Switzerland. Lots of events going on. In China today, I think women are getting a half day. No such luck for those of us here in the United States.
Fabulous.
There you
Thank
go.
you so much, Congresswoman Moore.
Listen, I'm sorry. I was enjoying hearing the history of Women's International Women's Day. And certainly we feel solidarity with women in Ukraine right now, with women in Iran, Afghanistan, because they are our sisters. We see them being, not allowed to go to school. I mean, let me just make this point. we often can see, how does the Bible put it? You can see the log in somebody else's eye, but you can't see the splinter in somebody else's eye and can't see the log in your own. While we're busy fighting for women's rights on an international level, we are plagued by the same sort of curses. I mean, domestic violence is killing women in the United States at an alarming rate. Lack of equity in pay. It's troubling me. I was in Oklahoma just yesterday, and they have the highest incarceration rate that's booming in Oklahoma is incarcerating women, and they're being incarcerated for being poor and not being able to take care of their children. And so, when people say to me, well, Gwen, don't you care about the men? Yes, I care about the men. I do a lot of things for workforce development and other things. But as a woman, it is hard to look past our own struggles, not just internationally and not just women in Iran or Afghanistan, but right here to see where the lack of equity keeps us really behind the eight ball. And, this is a very male ordered institution, which it doesn't surprise me at all when you see the targets of some of the members' cuts in services, that they'll have a huge impact on women. I mean, as you know, Social Security is often the only source of post-retirement income that women have. Women are disproportionately impacted by things that happen to Social Security and Medicare. And no matter what people are saying, there's a backdoor effort to cut Social Security, to put Social Security into the stock market, and to diminish the payments to Medicare and Social Security, which will have a disparate impact on women. I just left a Ways and Means meeting. We're having a markup, I believe, tomorrow. And one of the things that the new majority wants us to do in the Ways and Means Committee is to prioritize the order in which we should pay our bills in order to meet the whole debt ceiling debate. I don't want to have to try to convince you in this short venue that it's an absurd idea to try to do that. We need to pay our debts. But to show you, they have decided that things like Medicaid ought to be like a third tier priority. And of course, women and women who are at the end of life in nursing homes and women who are pregnant on Medicaid need Medicaid. And so women are disproportionately in need of Medicaid as well.
Thank you, Congresswoman Moore. We are so sorry we ran into some tech issues there, and we missed seeing you on camera for so much of what you had to say. And I'm wondering if there's any quick thing you want to share with us, and then we'll move on with our program. This is Margaret Prescott, and we're honoring you and we're lifting you up. You're our hero, Congresswoman Moore.
Let me just say, I am so glad we have International Women's Day, and I'm glad that that we are lifting each other up. I mean, I don't think it's important to honor me as much as it is to sort of honor our values and the things that, this is a time to sort of double down and quadruple down on the need for us to be autonomous in our bodies, for us to get an education. There's also kind of an anti-education wave moving through here. They're going to reform welfare. And I think that the monies that we provide to low-wage women and to children is going to become a target of a lot of cuts. So I'm hoping that you guys will be there as we move through the budgeting process to stand up for women and children. This year is going to be a very important year to do that.
Well, we certainly will. Thank you so much, Congresswoman Moore. Happy International Women's Day to you. And Sarah, I think Janina has to get to her son very shortly, so perhaps she could go first. Thank you, Congresswoman Moore.
Bye-bye.
Appreciate you. Bye-bye.
Will do. I'd like to introduce the following wonderful women who are impacted. And our first speaker will be Janina Gorman, is a Haudenosaunee. I'm sorry, you'll have to correct my pronunciation, Janina. Mother of 5 children from rural Appalachian, Pennsylvania, active in the Pennsylvania Poor People's Campaign. Her children taken from her 10 years ago by the child welfare system, and she has been fighting for them ever since. Also, Rachel West, who is with the U.S. Prostitutes Collective, a multiracial network of women who worked or have worked in the sex industry, organizing for the decriminalization of sex work and resources, so no one is driven into prostitution by poverty. And finally, our very own Kenya Alcazar, who will be speaking with us about her experience with being an immigrant and a very special person to us in the California Poor People's Campaign. Janina, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Haudenosaunee is how you say that. For the last decade, I have been fighting for my children who are taken away from my care, not because of abuse or neglect, but because I was fleeing from domestic violence and was forced into low-income housing, where the landlord refused to pay for necessary repairs and services. In August of 2013, my children were suddenly removed from my care. In 2018, I discovered I was no longer alone. Working together with Put People First PA, the PPC, and Every Mother is a Working Mother, my battles shifted and I began to win. I began to win visitation with my children and then regained custody. We filled the small town family court and scared the crap out of them. I did interviews both on a statewide and national level about my family's experience in the system. I even questioned a presidential candidate on how the child welfare system has harmed Indigenous families and communities like my own. Last year, we were forced to put my son in an RTF under threat of removing all of my children again. I am now getting weekly phone calls that my son is being beaten up, threatened, even denied the ability to go to the bathroom by staff. But when I stated he wasn't safe where he was and wants to come home, the guardian ad litem said he's not safe in your home either. But it was not in my home that he was raped 41 times. That abuse happened in a state-approved foster home. It was not in my home that my daughter's head was repeatedly bashed off of concrete. That was in a state-sponsored institution. Sorry. My children are now dealing with the trauma of being taken and abuse they faced and are still facing in the system. Before they were taken from me, none of them had any markers for physical or sexual abuse. Now all of my kids who are placed in foster care are actively being treated for both physical and sexual abuse. I continue to try to advocate for them with no help or guidance from the state systems that caused these problems originally. They often tell me he's maxed out on insurance and that they cannot give him the services he needs.
It's a very emotional situation, Janina. We really understand and we feel you. And I think we have gotten your message. We know that you are hasting to get to a meeting about this very situation. So Janina, thank you. We'll leave it there. Thank you for joining us. Thank you, Janina.
I'm so sorry. We are stronger together. Please reach out to the PPC in your state and see how you can help. Join us, and when we fight together, we'll win.
Absolutely. Thank you, Janina. Rachel.
Hi, I'm a single mom and one of the 80% of poor people in California who are women with children. Many of us are immigrants who haven't had access to a safety net, Many are single mothers in similar situations to mine who have had to resort to so-called crimes of poverty like prostitution and other underground ways of surviving to feed our kids. The number of women, many women of color, who have to go out on the streets to make a living is increasing as poverty is increasing at a horrifying rate. As food stamps and other life-saving programs are cut, when welfare is cut, more women are picked up for prostitution arrests. The expanded child tax credit payments in 2021 reduced child poverty by half, but they were cut in 2022. The caregiving work we mothers do is hard work and central to survival and to the economy, but we get nothing for it. We are the ones who have had to provide the welfare when the state denied us and our children, and we are not ashamed of what we've had to do to survive. Instead of addressing poverty, the response has been police crackdowns against sex workers, like the one going on now in the Mission District in San Francisco. Barricades have been erected and the area occupied by motorcycle cops ticketing people. Black, trans, and immigrant women are targeted for arrest. It's taken decades of organizing to challenge this. And last year, the repeal of the loitering law was won in California explicitly because of sexist, racist, and transphobic policing. Mothers who get arrested and imprisoned are at risk of having our children taken away and fast-tracked for adoption, especially women of color. 80% of women in prison are mothers, and single mothers are the fastest growing population of people going to prison. Most sex workers are mothers working to support families. So to then wrench their children away from them is the height of cruelty. It's hard to get a job with a criminal record and next to impossible to get our kids back. And a criminal conviction can lead to being denied the right to welfare and subsidized housing, and also to deportation. USPROS is proposing a guaranteed care income for single mothers at risk of criminalization and or losing their children to child welfare. We are coming together with others to demand an end to poverty, sexism, racism, and criminalization, and that the expanded child tax credit must be reinstated. Outlaw poverty, not prostitutes.
Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for the invitation and happy International Women's Day. As an immigrant, I think that we all have seen the struggle of the immigrants communities, but I think that it is important to recognize that immigration is not just an issue that happens here in the United States, but it's a global issue, an issue where a lot of women are being forced out of their communities because of economic and environmental devastation. We are here today to say that it is important for us to continue to fight, like the Poor People's Campaign, for a path for citizenship and immigration reform. But it is also important to recognize that every single human being has rights, and the right to housing, the right to food, the right to living wages, the right to women to have the right to their bodies are immigrant rights. So all of those rights are things that we are all asking for. There is nothing different. A piece of paper right now saying that you are a citizen or a resident means nothing if we cannot feed our kids, means nothing if we don't have a roof over our heads, means nothing if we don't have what we need to survive. During the pandemic, that was very clear. During the pandemic, we saw that women were taking a huge load. We were not just wives and mothers, we were teachers, we were nurses. We took on a lot of the work that needed to be done in order for our communities to survive. And we are still in a pandemic, and we are still pushing through to make sure that we're not being evicted, that our jobs are respecting our rights as workers, and that we are getting what we deserve in our communities, whether those are safe streets, where our children are not criminalized and are not, where our children are receiving the services and the support that they need. So today on International Women's Day, we are making a call for everybody to unite and everybody to organize within their communities, because the only way that we can win is when every single community in this entire country has been organizing and mobilizing and educating ourselves to make sure that we have what we deserve. Thank you.
So we now have with us Sierra Taylor. She's part of the National Welfare Rights Union and the New York State Poor People's Campaign, and she'll be singing a song from the New York Poor People's Campaign. Welcome, Sierra, and thank you.
Thank you so much, Peg. Happy International Working Women's Day to everyone on the call. Thank you so much to our speakers for sharing your story and your experiences. As Peg said, my name is Sierra Taylor. I am a member of the National Welfare Rights Union, and I will share a song from our organization called We Are Soldiers in the Welfare Rights. This song comes from a popular hymn, We Are Soldiers in God's Army. And we thought that today, being a day that lifts up and honors the struggle of nonviolent resistance and the seeking for the right to fare well for women around the world, that we would share this song with you all. We are soldiers in the welfare rights. We are soldiers in the welfare rights. We have to fight, although we've got to cry. We've got to hold on the justice banner. We've got to hold it up until we die. We are soldiers in the welfare rights. We have to fight, although we've got to cry. We've got to hold up the justice banner. We've got to hold it up until we die. Well, you know my mother, she is a soldier. She has her hands on the justice plow. And when the day comes, when she is older, she says she'll stand here and fight anyhow. We are soldiers in the welfare rights. We have to fight, although we've got to cry. We've got to hold up the justice banner. We've got to hold it up until we die. We've got to hold up the justice banner. We've got to hold it up until we die. Thank you.
Okay, hello, great pleasure to be here. My name is Nina Lopez. I'm originally from Argentina and I'm part of the Global Women's Strike in the UK. I'm here first of all to bring cheers from our network in Thailand, Empower, the sex worker organization, the Women Human Rights Defenders Collective, as well as hundreds of migrant and refugee women from Burma. And I'm also here to introduce and translate for Lady Mosombite, who is the General Secretary of the National Federation of Domestic Workers of Peru, as well as of a new trade union of wage and non-wage workers in the home, and the Peru coordinator of the Global Women's Strike. So Lady will...
Letty, I think we lost Letty's link. She is in Peru. We know too that there are a lot of issues going on in Peru, so we don't know how that's impacting her. Letty, are you there?
Letty, empezar y te traduzco. Ya te presenté, ¿ok? Ya dije quién eres.
Buenas tardes a todas y a todas, compañeras. Un abrazo a la distancia. Es grato para mí participar en este evento internacional por la campaña de los pobres. Tú me avisas, Nina, si sigo, ¿ya?
Okay, bueno, espera, ya te digo eso. Good afternoon. I'm very glad to be part of this Poor People's Campaign event.
Las trabajadoras del hogar somos parte de la clase trabajadora. Según el Ministerio de Trabajo en nuestro país, hay 420,328 personas que realizamos el trabajo del cuidado remunerado. Pero como federación sindical consideramos que somos más de 500,000 porque actualmente no hay una estadística actualizada de cuántos realmente existimos, cuántas trabajadoras del hogar existimos en nuestro país.
A ver, espera, lady. Okay. Domestic workers are part of the working class. According to the Ministry of Labor, there are about 420,328 people who are doing this remunerated work of care. As a union federation, we say that we are more than 500,000 because they're not very precise figures. Dale.
De este millón, el 95.3% somos mujeres. En su mayoría somos madres solteras, jefas de hogar. El 92.8% no tenemos contrato escrito, a pesar que ya tenemos nuestra ley actual. Por ejemplo, los sueldos son precarios. Además, somos triplemente discriminadas por ser mujeres pobres, migrantes y por nuestro origen, porque muchas somos que hemos venido de nuestro pueblo y muchas somos hijas de mujeres indígenas.
Okay, so of domestic workers, 95.3% are women, mostly single mothers, and 92.8% of us have no written contract despite having won a law. And our wages are very precarious. We are discriminated against for being women who are poor, for being immigrants who have come from the countryside, and also because many of us are daughters of indigenous women and rural women.
Pero gracias a nuestra lucha organizada en nuestros sindicatos y nuestra federación, hemos logrado 2 normas históricas, consideramos que es histórico, la cual va a cambiar la vida de miles de mujeres que realizamos el trabajo del cuidado remunerado y no remunerado. Me refiero a la ratificación del convenio 189 de la Organización Internacional del Trabajo en nuestro país. Pero además de eso, tenemos una ley promulgada hace poco, el 2020, que por supuesto reconoce nuestros derechos fundamentales, pero además nos reconoce como trabajadoras, como cualquier otro trabajador, porque siempre los empleadores y la sociedad dice que somos parte de la familia. Nosotros no somos parte de la familia, somos trabajadoras como cualquier otro trabajador.
A ver, espera, Lady, espera. Okay, thanks to our struggle, we have achieved historic legislation that will change the lives of many thousands of women who do this paid and unpaid caregiving work. The ILO Convention 189, as well as a legislation in Peru that was passed in 2020, which recognizes us as workers, which is very important because employers are always trying to say that we're part of the family, which is not true. We are not, we are workers, and recognizes our fundamental rights, such as paid maternity leave, written contracts, social security pension, etc.
Además, esta ley garantiza derechos fundamentales como es, por ejemplo, la maternidad que antes no teníamos, un contrato escrito, antes era solo verbal, seguridad social, pensión y jubilación. Estamos en un proceso de la implementación. Sabemos que no va a ser fácil, porque los empleadores se resisten a formalizar a su trabajadora del hogar. Aún más ahora estamos pasando en nuestro país por una coyuntura política muy difícil. Desde el 7
Okay, we know that it will not be easy to get this law implemented because employers are very reluctant to formalize the relationship with their domestic worker. And that's even more true, more difficult since the coup. Dale.
Sí, desde el 7 de diciembre, aquí el Congreso ha hecho un golpe de Estado en el cual puso como gobierno a la señora Dina Boluarte, ¿no? Ahora tenemos como presidenta. Pero esta presidenta ha concretado un gobierno autoritario, cívico y militar y policial. Según las últimas cifras que hizo la Defensoría del Pueblo, ha cobrado la vida de al menos 60 personas, han fallecido y 48 ejecuciones extrajudiciales. Es decir, sin contar que hay muchas hermanas y hermanos detenidos, ¿no?
Espera.
Nina, she likely will need to wrap soon. We've just lost some time because of the text.
It's not a lot, Margaret. Okay. In December, on the 7th of December last year, there was a congressional coup which put in power Dina Boluarte as president. And it's now an authoritarian civic, military, and police government, which, according to the latest figures from the Ombudsman, has claimed the lives of at least 60 people, 48 extrajudicial executions, and many, many people.
¿Sigo, no, Nina?
Sí.
Ahora, con el golpe de Estado se ha criminalizado la protesta. Nosotros, la protesta es un derecho que ha ganado la clase trabajadora. Eso nos ha costado, incluso vidas. Nuestras hermanas indígenas y campesinas se han trasladado de su pueblo a la ciudad para realizar sus justas demandas, arriesgando sus propias vidas, porque por años no son escuchadas, sus pueblos son abandonados. La señora Dina, o sea, la actual presidenta, consideramos que no nos representa como mujeres, porque se ha olvidado que para las mujeres la protección de la vida es lo primero. Está violando nuestros derechos a la vida, nuestros derechos humanos, pero en toda esta coyuntura política que atraviesa nuestro país, nosotras las mujeres hemos asumido muchas responsabilidades, como por ejemplo, hay representantes de Frente de Defensa de muchas organizaciones que se han agrupado para acordar las luchas. Otro grupo...
Disculpa, tenés que acabar, así que llegué al último párrafo.
Bueno, eso lo voy a decir muy rápido. Durante esta coyuntura, las organizaciones, los estudiantes, los sindicalistas están bien organizados. Solamente para decir un ejemplo, por ejemplo, las mujeres de comedores populares están cocinando para asegurar la alimentación de nuestros hermanos que están en pie de lucha. Y para terminar, yo sé que es 3 minutos nada más, este 8 de marzo las mujeres nos estamos movilizando en las calles, en redes solidarias como es como ustedes están escuchando, para que se reconozca y se valore y se pague el trabajo del hogar, el trabajo del cuidado. Nosotras las madres, las cuidadoras que trabajamos en nuestros propios hogares, así como en casas de otros, conocemos el valor de la vida y nos organizamos para que nuestros gobiernos deben invertir en cuidar y no matar. Bueno, lo hice rápido. Un abrazo para todas.
Okay.
Just to finish up, the coup has criminalized protest, a right that was won by the working class. And our indigenous and peasant sisters have risked their lives by coming from their villages to the city to protest to make their just demands. Dina Boluarte, the now president, does not represent us as women. She has forgotten that for women, the protection of life comes first. She is violating our rights to life and our human rights. This 8th of March, we women are mobilizing on the streets and in solidarity networks for caring work to be valued and paid. We mothers, we caregivers who work in our homes and in the homes of others, we know the value of life, and we're organizing to press for our governments to invest in caring and not in killing.
Thank you, Nina. Thank you, Letty.
Gracias,
we do have to pay
Margaret.
attention to what's happening
verte.
to our sisters internationally. Thank you. Thank you so much. Sorry, we're a little behind schedule. And Jackie?
So Congresswoman Barbara Lee is a forceful and progressive voice in Congress dedicated to social and economic justice, international peace, and civil and human rights. She's established a reputation for principled and independent stands, unafraid to take on the tough issues and speak her mind for her constituents, for a more just America and for a safer world. She received international attention as the only member of Congress to oppose the authorization for the use of force in the wake of the horrific September 11th attacks. It is my pleasure and a privilege to introduce my representative, Congresswoman Barbara Lee. The Congresswoman is in DC today voting, but she was kind enough to pre-record this powerful message for our International Women's Day event.
Thank you so much, Reverend Theo Harris, Shelley Barnes, my colleague, Congresswoman Gwen Moore, and all of the leaders and activists here with the Poor People's Campaign today for this event to call attention to the moral crisis of poverty. Your leadership and activism in the fight to end this injustice are so valued. Women and children make up the overwhelming share of the poor in the United States, especially women of color. In the world's richest country, this is a moral outrage. Decades of anti-poverty programs have failed to account for systemic racism and sexism, the gender wage gap, or the lack of affordable childcare, housing, and education. On International Women's Day, we must recognize that none of the issues women face stand alone. We can't end poverty or gender inequality without attacking the interconnected injustices of racism, militarism, or the climate emergency. That's why Congress must pass my third Reconstruction Resolution, which calls for a comprehensive response that prioritizes the needs of women, children, and low-income communities. Our current moment demands action of similarly historic proportions to the first and second Reconstructions to heal and transform the nation and to improve the status of women in America. We need a third Reconstruction that expands social welfare programs, reforms the criminal justice system, implements universal health care, a minimum living wage, climate reparations, union protections, housing guarantees, and so much more. A resolution is just the first step. Actually, fulfilling it will require pressure from faith communities, unions, workers, immigrants, and the racial justice, climate, and peace movements. That means you. But with the support of the Poor People's Campaign, I know we can achieve all of these goals and deliver for women and children across America. Thank you to all, and keep up the good fight.
Oh, good afternoon, all of you strong, beautiful, articulate women here today, including Shally Gupta Barnes, who is the policy director at both the Kairos Center and for the National Poor People's Campaign. Her BA is in economics, her law degree from UCLA, and she holds a master's in international affairs from Columbia University. Shally has spent decades working for poor communities on 4 continents. She is author and editor of numerous reports, has testified before Congress, and most recently published separate reports on the pandemic child tax credit and on insecure housing in the US. Shally lives in New York City with her 3 kids and husband, but says she is a Midwesterner at heart. Happy International Women's Day, and we welcome Shally Gupta Barnes.
Thank you, Mary, and thank you everyone who's organized this event today. It's incredibly moving and powerful and important. I wanted to use my time to raise up a few of the terrible and unnecessary cruelties that we've already heard, and look at them more broadly, in the broader context of women, especially poor and low-income women, people who present as women, cruelties that are being imposed through immoral legislation, immoral policies, and immoral politics. So we already know that, before the pandemic, there were 140 million people who were poor or one emergency away from being poor. And more than half of these people were women. 74 million of them were women, women of every race, ethnicity, gender, identity, living in every county, state, and region of the country. And most likely, although the numbers are harder to find on this, LGBTQ and trans women and women of color were overrepresented among these 74 million women. And most likely, probably close to half of them were white or are white. And these 74 million women were holding, again, before the pandemic, overdue, higher debt burdens that were possible to pay. They were receiving lower wages, they had worse health outcomes, and fewer opportunities to build up the resources necessary to withstand a massive crisis like COVID-19, because every day was already multiple crises all at once. Now, during the pandemic, we know that overall, poor and low-income counties had death rates that were multiple times higher than richer and wealthier counties. And while death rates on poor and low-income women specifically are hard to find, we do know that maternal death rates increased. We know that maternal death rates for Black women were disproportionately higher. And we know that job losses among the sectors of the economy that were hardest hit by the pandemic, job losses in leisure and hospitality, in care and education, in health services, government and public sector jobs, low-wage workers within those sectors of the economy that were worst hit, low-wage workers felt the worst impacts, and for the longest period of time. And again, these are jobs that are disproportionately held by poor women and women of color. In fact, more than 2 years later, there are over 1 million fewer women in the paid workforce, 1 million fewer women in the paid workforce. Now, this doesn't mean they aren't working. Family and caregiving responsibilities increased during this time, whether they were paid or not. And over these past several years, pandemic programs like the stimulus payments, the expanded child tax credit, the earned income tax credit that we heard earlier, some about earlier, access to Medicaid, protections from evictions, and protections from having your water shut off. All of these made the lives of these poor and low-income women a little bit better. They didn't end all the crises, they didn't end the challenges. But when these programs ended, all of that support was taken away. And it was taken away without increasing the minimum wage, without guaranteeing paid leave, without guaranteeing healthcare, without guaranteeing them any way to survive through this economy. And at the same time as these programs are ending, the Supreme Court decides to reverse Roe v. Wade. And so now more than a dozen states have restrictions on abortion, which again, we know impacts poor and low-income women and people who can become pregnant, who are poor and low-income. It affects these people the worst. And alongside these restrictions, I think it's really important to mention that there are now hundreds of anti-LGBTQ and trans bills across the country, which is really very alarming, especially given the recent attacks and calling out on trans folks at CPAC last week. So of course, we know these injustices are ongoing. We know that last week SNAP was rolled back, Medicaid is being rolled back, and poor and low-income women are most, who are the most likely to qualify for these programs are again the most, will suffer their worst impacts. And there is no good reason for any of these programs to have been ended. Whatever some people may say or whatever some people may believe, research shows that these programs did not keep people from working. They actually contributed to the economy. Every dollar that was added to a low-income household was multiplied into more than that dollar. So these programs that prioritize poor and low-income people, that prioritize poor and low-income women, are good for our economy. And in a country as wealthy as ours, these are the programs we should be prioritizing. Now, as you might remember, the 2017 Trump tax cut, the Trump tax laws, cut nearly $2 trillion, $1.9 trillion from government revenue, and added that to the national debt. It made billionaires 40% wealthier, and they got even more wealthy during the pandemic. And now, to balance that debt, to make up for those cuts that benefit the wealthy, these are the programs that are being cut. These programs that were vital during the pandemic, that were absolutely necessary before it, are being slashed, while Pentagon and military spending is approaching $1 trillion. Right? Our priorities are all out of whack, and people are led to believe, we're led to believe that military spending is good for the economy, that it creates jobs, that what's better at creating jobs is healthcare, education, caregiving. These are the jobs we need, right? Not military jobs. And in fact, programs like the child tax credit have been estimated to have a higher economic impact than military spending. Right? Imagine that a program like the expanded child tax credit was estimated by economic analysts to have a higher and positive economic impact, positive impact on the economy than military spending. So choosing the military, choosing the health and well-being of corporations over the rest of us, over poor and low-income women, is not only bad economics, it's immoral and it's wrong. So as I'm wrapping up, I wanted to just also say one thing, that today, International Women's Day, is also holy. And in my tradition, it's a very important festival. It's a festival of spring, it's a festival of renewal, it's a festival of life and of love. And I'm not just talking about individual love, I'm talking about love in its biggest sense, love in how society is organized, how life is organized. And so we know that these terrible conditions that many of us and poor and low-income women and trans women are facing, these are not the end of our story. The story, our story, of people who are marginalized and oppressed, who live and work in this society without the recognition, without the power, without the pay that we deserve. It never ends at these injustices. And as Sierra was saying earlier, we have to fight. Although we have to cry, we have to fight. And we do this out of love. And so, in a shout out to the National Welfare Rights and the women of welfare rights who have been organizing for decades, because we only get what we're organized to take. Out of love, we are here, building our power today and every day until we win everything that we deserve. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you. Reverend Monica. Thank you, Shally.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Barnes. My name is Reverend Monica. I'm here to introduce Jackie Johnson and Nana Kiamfi, name. Jackie Johnson will speak to the impact of cuts to healthcare and staff, and Nana Kiamfi will speak to missing and murdered Black women. Welcome to the International Women's Day. Please go ahead, Jackie.
Go ahead, Jackie.
Hello?
Yes.
Yeah, Jackie, go ahead.
Hi. Okay, thank you. I'm unmuted. Thank you, international women from all over. My name is Jacqueline Johnson. I live in Los Angeles, and I wanted to share with you about you can't have a testimony without a test. And I have 3 Ds of tests. The first being the death of my husband before he was 40 and responsible for 3 minor children. I got my second D with the denial of services and help from the welfare system, or having the nerve to be over the poverty line or making too much money. My third D was the disease. I had thyroid cancer. I found out because I didn't have health care that although I qualified for Medi-Cal, I had to be on an 80-20 program. That 20% that I had to pay oftentimes went into hundreds of dollars because of co-pays and lab tests and everything. So my situation and my struggle is not different. It's just that my test scores were D's. But I want to say today that although it was a struggle and although it was not easy, that I can give testimony today because of people that are involved with international women and caring and sharing. And my testimony is that I passed those tests, and I'm able to say that missing the deadline does not keep you from the finish line. So thank you for all that you do and letting me be able to say thank you, because you cannot have a testimony for all of us who've had those tests. So thank you.
Nana.
Thank you. Greetings, everyone. Happy International Women's Day.
Thanks to the Poor People's Campaign, to Global Women's Strike. I want to thank Margaret also for inviting me and for all of the people who have organized this wonderful celebration of the resilience and resistance of women and femmes against white supremacy, patriarchy, class inequality, and all the oppressive structures that we know disproportionately impact Black, Indigenous, and other marginalized women. The Black Coalition Fighting Back Serial Murders has been campaigning to press our communities all over the country to look at what is happening with missing and murdered Black women and to prioritize those murders, prioritize those families instead of trivializing them, dehumanizing them, and refusing to be of support to those communities and to those families now, as we see happening again all across the country, and to draw attention to the general lack of resources and the neglect, not just here in South Los Angeles, where we are founded and begun, but also in similar communities across the United States. Our banner has been Black Women's Count, years before Black Lives Matter, asserting the importance and the value of Black women. We've all seen the headlines of Black women missing and killed by serial killers throughout the country, often years after sisters in the community have been raising the alarm about lost siblings that either have received no response or downright scorn and insults from police and elected officials who claim to keep us safe. Black, and I must mention, Indigenous women as well, are literally being disappeared and murdered with impunity because those in power and their systems do not value our lives outside of how we can be exploited for their benefit. On this International Women's Day, we reaffirm that Black and Indigenous women will not be erased, disappeared, exploited, impoverished, and murdered without consequence. In the words of the Black women fighting apartheid in the time of apartheid in South Africa, you have touched the women, you have struck a rock, you have unleashed a boulder, and you will be crushed. We stand in solidarity with our sisters in struggle and vow to continue the work to build a world where all women, but particularly Black and Indigenous women, girls, femmes, and other marginalized women thrive and are free. Thank you.
Thank you, Nana. Rosanna.
Yes, good morning, everybody, or good afternoon. My name is Rosanna Cambron. I'm with Military Families Speak Out. You know, the war economy is the link to solving the crisis we are experiencing. Our tax dollars can be transferred to meet people's basic needs. Here to talk a little bit more about it is Darren DeLu, from President of Women's International League for Peace and Freedom, Jody Evans, who is the co-founder of Code Pink, and George Friday, who is the national organizer United for Peace and Justice.
Thank you, everyone. And I am speaking up to say that the world today is investing, sadly, in killing, not caring. The global military spending was nearly $2 trillion in 2019. And in the US, there's no commitment, despite claims to end poverty for anyone. The Congress continues to vote for the war economy. In 2023, nearly $860 billion went to the Pentagon, which is $45 billion more than the Pentagon even requested. Women's International League for Peace and Freedom seeks to end war and the causes of war. That includes the paradigms that oppress whole groups of people, like the 5 identified by the Poor People's Campaign. And that's why WILPF has been a national partner with the Poor People's Campaign since the beginning. Right now, the war economy is increasing the violence against women. It's virtually a war against women. The whole attitude that militarism creates, that violence is a solution has contributed to the epidemic of violence against women, with 18,000 women killed by their intimate partners, 2001 to 2019. Compare that to the soldiers killed in Iraq and Afghanistan, which was 7,000. Beyond that, violence of inadequate money for healthcare has led to another 14,400 women who died right before, during, or just after childbirth. Additionally, women are leading impoverished lives because of the lack of money for college loans, community resources and infrastructure, and the lack of money for government-paid parental leave and childcare programs. And one of the greatest harms for women, violence against them, is ecological violence. This is affecting women around the globe with their families. We see a military economy in the US based on the extractive economy, which benefits corporations to have subsidized access to resources so they can profit and we pay for it. How does this happen? The US has over 800 bases globally in countries around the world. Each of those bases is contributing is toxifying the environment around them with all kinds of chemicals and poisons. WILPF is working on that. Additionally, these bases mean that we have very long supply chains to reach all those military bases, and that means lots of burning of carbon-based fuels for planes, ships, and ground transportation. So all of that leads to a very toxic world. We have to act now to make a difference. Right now, the Congress is beginning to draw up the 2024 military budget. People over the Pentagon Act, sponsored by Barbara Lee and others, would cut $100 billion from that budget. That's not enough. Both PPC and WILPF want larger cuts, but we must contact our Congress members now to call for the People Over Pentagon Act. And like WILPF, which has been around for over 100 years, we have to be persistent. Thank you.
Thank you to all the voices we have heard and been inspired by today, and to all of you organizers who hold us in this container to be joined today on International Women's Day. We live in a war economy, as we've heard often today, and we in the United States live in the driving force of war and militarism globally, and the driving force of inequality, which is a war on the people. This day was called by working women globally demanding the right to vote. And March 8th was the day the working women, the textile workers in Russia, rose to call for bread and peace in 2017. And just, I think, 7 days later, one of their calls was to end the war and to end Tsarist Russia, and that happened 7 days later. So women are very effective at starting revolutions and rising together. May we continue that call for bread and peace as we watch the world go backwards in values, and certainly backwards in the ways that women are being treated on this planet today. At Code Pink, we are calling for diplomacy and cooperation as the US drives a war on Russia, using Ukrainian people as fodder, as they did in Afghanistan, and as they splatter lies and hate about China to the people of the world, just as they did in the drive to war in Iraq. China is not our enemy. We need cooperation with China for the very serious issues that we should be taking on, like climate change, and we need diplomacy with Ukraine and Russia. We need to end the killing. Women bear the brunt of the killing. We're talking about 38 million refugees from the US invasion of Iraq, the bombing of Libya, 38 million refugees in the Middle East. The refugees out of Ukraine are mostly women. Those left behind, we hear from them, they're being raped by Ukrainian men, but can't talk about it because it would make Ukraine look bad. They call it the Anne Frank moment. They're hiding their children, their sons, their husbands, and their fathers in their homes because conscription is 18 to 60. So we know that war affects women first. As mothers, as those who care for home, as those who care. We are alive from care. That is the peace economy. So one of the things that we're also doing today is we're calling on Biden to fire Undersecretary of State Victoria Nuland. She, Code Pink feminists opposed her nomination way in the beginning, out of the concern that she would bring pain and heartache to mothers and daughters as she fomented war in their midst. Instead of promoting diplomacy, which is the job of the Undersecretary of State, Nuland lights matches wherever she meddles, agitating for war in Afghanistan, Iraq, and now Ukraine. If feminists remain silent or support this Bush-era neocon simply because she's a woman, Victoria Nuland might just burn down the world in a nuclear fire. And this is because her husband has convinced everyone in Washington that the US can win a nuclear war. He instead should be muzzled and in jail. So instead of promoting ceasefire and peace negotiations in Ukraine, Victoria Nuland chooses to escalate a war by promising the US will arm Ukraine to seize Crimea, the site of Russia's naval fleet on the Black Sea, part of Russia for 200 years and home to ethnic Russians who voted to join the Russian Federation. She is the instigator of war, and let's not forget she was part of the coup, of driving the coup in 2014 in Ukraine. So on International Women's Day, women don't let women drive war. Instead, we at Code Pink are going to urge President Biden to fire Nuland and pursue a people-centered feminist foreign policy that employs diplomacy to bring this war to an end now. She's failing her job and deserves a pink slip. You can join us, and I'll put the link in the chat after, along with how you can tell Biden that we need diplomacy. To end war, we must end the war economy. War serves the war economy. The peace economy is the feminist economy, the giving, sharing, caring, thriving, relational, resilient economy without which none of us would be alive. We must divest ourselves from the war economy and cultivate our local peace economies to care for each other, to create a home sweet home that allows everyone to thrive. Peace creates conditions conducive for life. Where that is not happening, that is war, and we call it out. Today, you can share our actions on Code Pink social medias, on Twitter, on Facebook, on Instagram, and on TikTok. And please use the hashtag IWDEndWar. So a hashtag that's being used globally, you link it as you hashtag International Women's Day. Let's be visible globally that this is a day that women say end war. Thank you for all you do. Peace.
Greetings. It's a real honor and joy to be part of today and connected with such wonderful beings. So glad to be here. But what a time, right? It's like the world is crazy. So that's a lot of chaos. And chaos, well directed, can become transformative change. If you don't believe me, just ask Octavia Butler. All right, so I actually had a really blessed, sacred, special gift when I was a young child. I grew up in rural North Carolina in a town where once a year, the Klan marched down the street. Now it was called a parade. We always called it a parade, but I know now it was a march. My grandpa would stand on the sidewalk with his hunting rifle, and we could not go further than the porch. But one of the great things about my growing up, well, there's one other thing that was maybe not so great, but who knows? I started the first grade in 1966 and went to a segregated school. Now, y'all know when Brown v. Board of Education happened. Our schools in my county were segregated, desegregated in 1968. So in that segregated first grade, which I'll never forget, I learned that the US bombed Hiroshima on August 6th. I wish I could give you an idea of what that felt like, sitting in that little desk with my little red dress and my little bow in my hair, and hearing that and like a jolt from the bottom of my feet to the top of my head, because my birthday is August 6th. There weren't a lot of low-income Black young women from the rural South that had such a clear message early in life about what you're supposed to do with your life and your energy. So, but working for justice became my banner. And that is a mix with learning about Hiroshima and what was going on being raised in the Catholic Church at St. Dorothy's Catholic Church in Lincoln. So, and working for justice meant ending all kinds of war, including the abolition of nuclear weapons. It also meant ending racism and classism and heterosexism and homophobia, all of it. And that felt like that was something that could be done. And now, 50-something years later, how do we manifest that? How do we hold on to, in a time of craziness and chaos, hold on to a vision of genuine justice for every being, for all beings? So it's not just my issue, it's your issue. It's Ralph's issue. It's Hermione's issue. That happens with fusion organizing, which the Poor People's Campaign is modeling very, very well across the country. Because it means that those of us who know we have to have economic justice and environmental justice and gender justice and living wages for everyone come together and we build our power. We do the long-term work, and I do mean long-term. This is a marathon, not a sprint. So we may be laying the foundation and building the platform way before the structure is finished and everyone's inside. But that's our work, that's our journey. That's what we do while we're here. When the young woman sang earlier about you do this until you die, I was like, Lord, well, we do the work because it's our work. And it's a joy to do it. We bring love to it. And we will build power so that we make demands, not requests. And we do not take one step forward without each other. And we never take any step back. So we go forward together and not ever one step back. Thank you so much. Many blessings of the day.
Wow, thank you, George. I have the pleasure of introducing our next musician, Grammy-nominated singer, songwriter, and song leader, Arne Batson. She uses music to create spiritual pathways for health and wholeness while advocating for progressive social change. Arne's dedication to racial and environmental justice is an extension of her work with the internationally acclaimed ensemble Sweet Honey in the Rock. She serves as artistic director for the Hearts of Fire music community and Voices Raised LA. She contributes original compositions to the Art and Theomusicology Working Group of the California Poor People's Campaign, for which we are very grateful. Today she will offer, "Are there any rights that I'm entitled to?" Thank you, Arne.
Greetings, greetings. Thank you all so much for inviting me to observe International Women's Day with you. We know this is a global day that celebrates the historical, the cultural, and political achievements of women. And we also observe in support of taking action against gender inequality around the world. I've actually changed the song. Hope you don't mind. I am bringing forward a song that comes from a speech given by the great Sojourner Truth. For those of you who know, she's an African-American women's rights activist and abolitionist. She fought to end slavery. Born in 1797, she found her own freedom in 1826, and we are all still the beneficiaries of her powerful voice. She was a brilliant orator and songwriter, and her most famous speech, "Ain't I a Woman, Ain't I a Woman?" was delivered without preparation at the Ohio Women's Rights Convention in 1851. And a portion of that text was set to music by Patricia Johnson. It was recorded by Sweet Honey in the Rock in 1979. And I'm bringing forward to you, "Ain't I a Woman?" A woman woman. Tote that barge and lift that bell. Don't you know, world, I can work like hell. And ain't I a woman? I've got love for you, my child and my fam. It's for you I work so hard in this land. And I am a woman. Well, now don't get me wrong, I can't complain. Through all the storms and ice and rain, I emerge still a woman. Yes, I said don't get me wrong, I can't complain. Through all the storm and ice and rain, I emerge still a woman. Tote that barge and lift that bell. Don't you know, world, I can work like hell. And ain't I a woman? I've got love for you, my child and my fam. It's for you I work so hard in this land. And I am a woman, yeah. Well, don't get me wrong, I can't complain. Through all the storm and ice and rain, I emerge still a woman. Oh, no, don't get me wrong, I can't complain. Through all the storm and ice and rain, I emerge still a woman. Oh, I emerge still a woman. Oh, I emerge still a woman, a woman, a woman, a woman, a woman.
All righty. Fantastic. Arne. All righty. What I'd like to do now is to introduce Karen Fraley. She is based in rural Southern Illinois. She's a trained horticulturist. She has been a protector of the natural world for the past 3 decades. She is a founding member and co-director of Shawnee Forest Defense. And in fact, they are working to establish Shawnee National Park as the nation's first climate preserve. Her deep connection with the natural world began in childhood mushroom hunting with her grandmother. She realized that understanding all the parts that make up a forest, not just the plants, helps to understand the whole. She's also a caregiver for her mom. Karen, welcome.
Thank you, Margaret. Can you hear me?
We can hear you. We can't see you. Are you able to get on camera?
No, I've been trying and I cannot.
Okay,
So
that's fine.
imagine someone
Go
with
for
lots of vines coming out of their head.
Just go for it. That's quite all right.
Great. Thank you, Margaret. And thank you to all of the powerful women who have organized this Women's Day. I'm honored and I'm so humbled to have been invited to speak to you all and share some of my story. Today, I'm representing Shawnee Forest Defense here in far, far Southern Illinois. Most people think of Illinois as being just flat with cornfields and prairies, but we actually in the far southern part of Illinois have a tremendous, beautiful forest full of all kinds of living things. And it seems that I've always been drawn into the woods and the forests since as a little girl to explore the meadows and streams and find the calm and quiet that I really seem to crave and need daily, even now. You know, and as an adult, I've come to realize that it's our job as humans, and on especially this day as women, to speak out and advocate and care for those who cannot. I've been a caretaker for my mother for nearly 10 years, helping guide her through hallucinations, depression, and anxiety and mental health, all while building a relationship that I never knew we would have. I've learned through that not being a mother that myself, that you learn to care for someone so deeply that you will do anything for them. And I see that in the caretakers my mother has now in the nursing home. And earlier at the very beginning, someone talked about the caretakers in nursing homes and how underappreciated they are. And I know that they do what they do out of love, and it brings tears to my eyes to think about them. But today I'm here to talk about, I'm part of a movement to create the first national park in Illinois, and also the first of what we hope to be many climate preserves. Whether it's a mother with mental illness or the forest and its creatures under violent attack via logging, spraying, burning, and climate change, they all need our tending and our caretaking. And so our forest in Southern Illinois and across the nation actually are under attack by managers who want to manage them to death, is how I look at it. And with climate change, we need to tend and care for our forests and preserve them. So we have a movement underway to create the first national park in Illinois, to move the Shawnee National Forest out of the USDA Forest Service and into the care of the National Park Service, to create the Shawnee National Park and Climate Preserve. This would stop some of the wholesale destruction of one of our most sacred resources, our trees, and all the life they generate. Recent research has shown that standing, mature, deciduous forests are one of the best and easiest ways to sequester carbon. It's time to stop destroying our forests and instead treasure them for the life-giving forces they are. So we're working day and night here in the Shawnee to help introduce legislation to create the first climate preserve in the US, the first of many, we hope. Please we're asking you to contact your US reps and senators to ask that they partner with the Illinois congressional delegation to make this happen. And you can visit ShawneeForestDefense.org for more information. We really truly feel that this is something that needs to spread across the country to help mitigate climate change. And that's what I'm doing for my caretaking. And thank you again so much.
Thank you so much, Karen. Many of us today, the theme is invest in caring, not killing. And one of the things that we are asking for is for a care income for people who do caregiving for children, for elders, for people, but also those who care for the natural world. So thank you for your work, Karen. Again, we're waiting to see if Dolores Huerta will be able to get on. But meanwhile, I'm wondering, Pat Albright, if you're available, we have yet another treat coming up. The Reverend Annie Chambers, you will be introducing her. Pat Albright, go for it.
Well, we are honored to have with us today Reverend Annie Chambers, who helped to organize and participated in the first Poor People's Campaign. She's a longtime activist in the welfare rights movement, board member of the National Welfare Rights Union, and member of the People's Power Assembly in Baltimore, Maryland. Her presence here today is a reminder that the roots of the Poor People's Campaign are in the welfare rights movement. Welfare mothers in the Welfare Rights Organization educated Dr. Martin Luther King and encouraged him to begin the Poor People's Campaign. Reverend Annie, thanks so much for being here with us today.
Thank everyone for being here, and I consider it an honor and a blessing to be here. I want to speak on poverty in America, and especially for women who have been the caregivers, the head of all the fronts of the fights in America against poverty and for food and hunger for our people all over the country. And I want to start with saying, we are gathered as mothers, caregivers, family members when I say family members, we take on other children and care for them. We have to join together. We must stand and fight. It is by no mistake that the fight has gone on against poverty, because it was always women in front of the fight. They didn't put us in the front of the fight in the movement, but we did the fighting. We were the organizers. We were the ones that made sure everything worked. And even some of the great speeches that you hear now that people credit other people with speaking, some of those speeches were written by women and given to the men. And they spoke them, but they were our words. We cared and fought. We have cared and fought so long in this country that it is time now, I'm saying to women all over, stand up, take your rightful place. And I'm saying, if never be behind again, never stand behind again in any movement. We have led the movement. We fought the movement in the movement. Welfare rights went out and organized. Dr. King came and got us because they didn't have an inkling who the poor people was. They had seen poverty, didn't even know it exists like it did. But we had always lived it, and welfare rights knew what to do. We organized people all over this country to come to the very first Poor People's Campaign and fought. We continue to support it, the first, the second, and even now. So women, as women, we have to stand up and fight. But we must have our voices to be heard. We must not be silent. And when I mean silent, is that we do the work and then other people get the credit. We deserve to be out and heard at all times. So I'm saying to every woman in America that's in poverty and fighting poverty, stand up and be heard. We will lead this movement. It is by no mistake that we, at this time for young women, I applaud you all. But mothers and grandmothers and elders like me, we have to support you. We have to support you and educate you, allow you to stand. I'm 81 years old, but I will continue to work. As being a part of People's Power Assembly at this particular time, I say, stand up, sisters, stand up and fight. Never forget that you have that right. Thank you.
Thank you, Reverend Annie. Powerful words there. And so glad you're able to join us.
Okay, I'm just so honored. I am honored to have another opportunity to introduce Dr. Reverend Liz Theoharis. She's the director of the Cairo Center for Religions, Rights, and Social Justice at Union Theological Seminary and co-chair of the Poor People's Campaign, a national call for moral revival with the Reverend Dr. William J. Barber II. I'm a mother, a grandmother, sister, etc. I'm also a breast cancer survivor. As women, we all hold many jobs, often without what we need. I appreciate Dr. Reverend, her energy and dedication to justice for poor people. Over the decades, she has been recognized by the National Civil Rights Museum and the Congressional Hunger Center and received many awards, including the Selma Bridge Award. In 2020, she was named one of 15 faith leaders to watch by the Center for American Progress and was named one of 11 women
Shaping the Church by Sojourners. As you can see, Dr. Reverend Theoharis is an amazing role model to everyone, especially women and girls. She's busy doing the work. I present to you Dr. Liz Theoharis, and I thank you for joining our International Women's Day celebration.
Well, thank you so much. It's so great to be with everybody. An honor and a joy on this International Women's Day. You know, and we in the Poor People's Campaign, a national call for more revival, hold up the strength and the power of poor and low-income women and poor and low-income people all across this country. You know, on this International Women's Day, you know, we're gathered here to mourn the suffering and the inequality of women and girls, but we're also here to celebrate those that are committed to bringing about a revolution of moral values, change from the bottom up, and you know, this breaking every chain of injustice. I have been in this work for about 30 years of my life, and I was fortunate enough to be introduced 30 years ago to leaders of the National Welfare Rights Union. And so Reverend Annie Chambers, who was just speaking, is one of my heroes, and surely why I am still involved and inspired to keep on doing this work. I remember being at a survival summit in Philadelphia where Reverend Dr. Yvonne Delp preaching about that it's not that poor people are sinners, it's that poverty is a sin against God that could and should be ended. I remember having Marion Kramer at Highland Park, Michigan, where my mom grew up, talking about committing myself to something bigger, to linking up our struggles, to also this idea of having the right to thrive and not just barely survive, right? And then when I had my children, I remember Marion and so many other folks in this work who said to me over and over again, as I raised my children in the struggle, you know, that children are not in the way, they are the way. And I hold that with me still. And I think it's really important that our movement holds that with us still. I'm thinking about folks like Jesse Lee Beer out of Maine, who said, take away our poverty, not our children. I'm thinking about Claire McClinton out of Flint, Michigan, who connected poverty and livelihood issues and water to our democracy, and said to the world that before they could poison that water in Flint and take away the water, they had to first take away the democracy. And so, and I think about you, Reverend Annie, Reverend Annie Chambers, who, you know, was there teaching and preaching in the 67, 68 Poor People's Campaign, who had a baby and then dropped that baby off with her father and kept on making sure that the nation pay attention to those that are hurt first and worst, who are bringing about this deep reconstruction from the bottom up. And, you know, this message that we're here, we're poor, we're not going anywhere until we win all of our rights. And you know, I think one of the things I want to say, and then I'll be done, is you know, there's a lot we've been hearing some in this gathering and otherwise about, you know, strong policies that can lift the load of poverty. And we need to know that those policies, those prescriptions to the problems that we're facing, are not coming from politicians and policymakers. They're coming out of the struggles of people, especially where poor women, women of color, and others are leading us towards change. And so I think that on this International Women's Day, we know that it's those that are most impacted by racism and poverty, by ecological devastation, militarism, and this false moral narrative of religious nationalism. I mean, must lead and are leading. And, you know, we know that those who must be free are striking that first blow. Those in pain are knowing when their pain is relieved. And when we look at history, we see that it is, and not just in history, when we look around the Zoom room, when we look around this nation, this world, we see that it is especially poor women and poor women of color who are building from the bottom and breaking every chain. And it is in that work that I am so incredibly honored to work alongside each and every one of you, to work alongside Bishop William Barber and lead this Poor People's Campaign, and for us to indeed move forward together in that one step.
Wow. Reverend Dr. Liz Theoharis, thank you so much. We love you. Indeed, you have helped to popularize Take Away Our Poverty, Not Our Children. All the best. International Women's Day to you. And what I'd like to do now, thank you so much, Reverend Liz. We know you're on a tight schedule today. Waiting in the wings to speak with us now. And I'd like to just let our audience know that we have about 10 minutes of programming. We're running a little bit over. We had some technical difficulties earlier, but you're not going to want to miss any of this. Dolores Huerta is an icon. We're honoring her today. She's going to be 92 years old on April the 10th. Dolores Huerta, along with Cesar Chavez, founded and helped to build the Farm Workers Union, a longtime women's rights campaigner. She has served on the boards of several feminist organizations. She has been recognized by several US presidents and many others, but Dolores Huerta always finds the time to be available to stand with the grassroots. She continues her work via the Dolores Huerta Foundation. Dolores Huerta, thank you for joining us. There you are. We see you, Dolores.
Hi, I just want to say hello to everybody. And I'm speaking here from Channel Islands, where they have a Smithsonian exhibit of my work with the farm worker. That's Channel Islands here in Ventura County, California. And I just want to say to everybody out there, a little call to action. We have the Equal Rights Amendment right now that is stuck in the Senate of the United States of America. We've been trying for decades to try the Equal Rights Amendment for Women passed. If we pass this, this will be in the Constitution of the United States of America, and we only need one senator to help us pass this. So I just want to say to all the women that are listening today, please email your senators and tell them, yes, we need to pass the Equal Rights Amendment for women now. It already passed the House. We just have to pass the Senate, okay? And we have a ruling that it doesn't have to be 2/3, it can be a majority. So if we want to celebrate International Women's Day today, we have to do it with a call to action. And I want to ask everybody, reach out to all of your friends or organizations that you know, have them email immediately to Senator Schumer, to your own local senator, and ask them to please push so we can finally get the Equal Rights Amendment for women. It's been too long. We know women are under attack viciously now as never before. And so it's time for us to act. And so I want to ask all the sisters out there to please, we have to get this done. Si se puede. Thank you.
Thank you, Dolores. Thank you so very much for joining us, and happy International Women's Day to you.
Thank you,
You're usually with us for so many years on International Women's Day. All
Thank you,
righty.
Mars. Thank you.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. We are close there to a wrap of our program, but we would not be the Poor People's Campaign without a call to action. Betty and Nell, I'm wondering if you're ready to join us, and then we have some fabulous music as we go out.
Yes. So thank you so much, everyone, for being here and for helping us celebrate International Women's Day, lifting folks up, and also lifting up the issues that are still impacting us as women. We want to just remind you that we've heard from several women's organizations, and they're calling us into action, more action. I'm sure a lot of us are already in action. And so we want to, just highlight the fact that the National Welfare Rights Union is here asking for our ongoing support in the struggle for women, who are poor, and calling for the decriminalization of prostitution. So there's work to be done there. We are, here with women who are organizing to dismantle the military economy or to build a peace economy out of the military budget, which there's more than enough money there to build a peace economy so that everyone can have what we need and deserve. And so we're going to be dropping the links in to connect with those folks again in the chat, so you can look for those. So please save the chat so that you can reach out to folks and let them know that you're in it with them. Betty?
Yeah, hi, everybody. This is a wonderful program. Thanks to everybody who spoke and everybody doing the tech and all that. I just want to let you guys know on June 18th of last year, the Poor People's Campaign assembled in Washington, D.C. with allies from across the country. We joined in solidarity and we rolled out the third Reconstruction agenda to heal the nation, end poverty and low wages from the bottom up. The third Reconstruction is a 14-point comprehensive policy agenda with demands and solutions to meet the needs of 140 million people living in poverty in the USA. Please use the link in the chat for more information on the third Reconstruction agenda. To uplift the demands of the third Reconstruction agenda, each state is rolling out campaigns. Here in California, we are planning our campaign, Close the Wealth Gap. Please join us in the planning on Wednesdays at 6:30, and there is a link in the chat. We can also realize much of the 14-point comprehensive policy demands of the third Reconstruction here in California. We have the opportunity to expand rent control by passing the Justice for Renters ballot initiative, which will be on the ballot in 2024. So please consider endorsing and having your organization endorse the initiative. Help by volunteering. A link to endorse and a link for more information about the Justice for Renters ballot initiative is in the chat. We can, as we know, quality healthcare is way too expensive here in the US. As Jacqueline Johnson said, when she was ill with thyroid cancer, she could not afford the 20% copays they were requiring, even when she was on Medi-Cal. And Medi-Cal is Medicaid here in California. We need a healthcare system that delivers quality guaranteed healthcare regardless of your ability to pay, with no copays, no premiums or deductibles. The CalCare bill, AB 1690, sponsored by the California Nurses Association, will bring all Californians, regardless of their immigration status, these type of benefits. So we are having a volunteer weekend of action on March 25th and 26th. So you can join a hosted CalCare action. I put the link inside the chat, and also please sign the CalCare petition. The link is also in the chat. So remember, we can get CalCare, we can get comprehensive guaranteed benefits, quality benefits for everybody with AB 1690. And thank you, everybody.
Thank you again for joining, and we're organizing on Wednesday evenings. There'll be a link to join us. We're planning public reading of the Beyond Vietnam, A Time to Break Silence, Dr. King's prophetic speech from 1967. So we'll look forward to seeing you soon, hopefully.
All righty. Thank you so much, Nell and Betty. And I also hope there's information in the chat where people could get information about the Care Income Now petition. All right, for those caring for people in the land. Sydney Ross Risden, who has worked hard. The planning group has worked so hard. Sydney, you have some thank yous before we have some music. Sydney.
Hi, everybody. And I want to share thank yous from the organizations who joined together to create today's event. First of all, the California Poor People's Campaign, several members of its coordinating committee, and its Policy and Education Working Group, together with co-sponsors Code Pink, Global Women's Strike, Pennsylvania Poor People's Campaign, National Welfare Rights Union, United for Peace and Justice, Women of Color in the Global Women's Strike, Women's International League for Peace and Freedom, and the Women's March Foundation LA. Thanks to all, including the program, tech, and social media and press working groups who worked together to pull today's event off. And thank you also to the organizations who endorsed the event and helped to publicize it: Alexandria House, Care Income Now, Children's Defense Fund, Every Mother is a Working Mother Network, Extinction Rebellion, in the San Francisco Bay Area, Housing is a Human Right, a division of the AIDS Healthcare Foundation, LA Baby Co-op, Michigan Welfare Rights Union, Martin Luther King Coalition of Greater Los Angeles, Mothers Outreach in Washington, D.C., Oxfam America,
Pacifica Radio's Sojourner Truth, Payday Men's Network, Peace, Justice, Sustainability Now, People's Power Assembly in Baltimore, Raging Grannies, New York City, U.S. Prostitutes Collective, Veterans for Peace, LA, Welfare Warriors in Wisconsin, Western Regional Advocacy Project, and Western States Legal Foundation. Also to KPFK Radio, our media sponsor. And a huge thank you to all of today's powerful speakers, to the women who sang so beautifully, to our tech team, and to all who have participated. Thanks.
But just as conscientious action has reversed the tide of public opinion and government policy, we must now turn our attention and the sole force of the movement of people of goodwill to the problems of the poor here at home. My husband always saw the problem of racism and poverty here at home and militarism abroad as two sides of the same coin. In fact, it is even very clear that our policy at home is to try to solve social problems through military means, just as we have done abroad. The interrelatedness of domestic and foreign affairs is no longer questioned. The bombs we drop on the people of Vietnam continue to explode at home with all of their devastating potential. And so I would invite you to join us in Washington in our effort to enable the poor people of this nation to enjoy a fair share of America's blessing. There is no reason why a nation as rich as ours should be blighted by poverty, disease, and illiteracy. It is plain that we don't care about our poor people except to exploit them as cheap labor and victimize them through excessive rents and consumer prices. Our Congress passes laws which subsidize corporation farms, oil companies, airlines, and houses for suburbia. But when they turn their attention to the poor, they suddenly become concerned about balancing the budget and cut back on funds for Head Start, Medicare, and mental health appropriations. The most tragic of these cuts is the welfare section to the Social Security Amendment, which freezes federal funds for millions of needy children who are desperately poor but who do not receive public assistance. It forces mothers to leave their children and accept work or training, leaving their children to grow up in the streets as tomorrow's social problems. This law must be repealed, and I encourage you to join Welfare Mothers on May 12th, Mother's Day, and call upon Congress to establish a guaranteed annual income instead of these racist and archaic measures. These measures which dehumanize God's children and create more social problems than they solve. We will be marching toward Washington soon. On Thursday, May 2nd, we will return to Memphis to begin where my husband was slain and kick off his Poor People's Campaign. We will be marching toward Washington to demand that America share its abundant life with all its citizens.
Happy International Women's Day to all. And Nell, I think you found some incredible music. Nell, what are we gonna hear?
Here we come, here we come. It's Apple. Here we come, here we come. We're coming. Here we come, here we come. It's Apple. Here we come, here we come. We're coming. Here we come, here we come. It's Apple. Filling up the streets, we will take them like a thunderstorm. Raining down our power in the struggle, it has been reborn. We are striking lightning for our people. Do you hear our call? We have come for justice, time is up. We'll wait no more. Here we come, here we come. We're coming. Here we come, here we come. It's Apple. No more taking lives, no more lies. We won't compromise. We have had enough. We are strong and we're organized. We are not alone. We're on the path that was carved by those who came before, and they are with us. It's time to rise. Here we come, here we come. We're coming. Here we come, here we come. It's Apple. Every step is a heartbeat, moving our feet as we're bringing the heat. Every breath for those who died left us alive to carry on the fight. Every day is a new day to find a new way. Together we liberate life from all forms of oppression, cause we are destined to live in love. Love is a radical power to heal the soul. Let love rain down from the clouds. Here we come, here we come. We're coming. Here we come, here we come. It's that way.
Here we come indeed. So our program is over. And congrats to everyone.